All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to today's Edison Electric Institute webinar. Today we have a presentation from Sol Ali, who's the Director of Safety, Strategy, and Support Services at UK Power Networks. And today's presentation will focus on a number of things that UK Power Networks has done for which they were the recipient of EEI's Edison Award, which is our annual industry award that recognizes leadership and innovation in the industry. What I think is particularly interesting about today's presentation and about the award that they received is that really this was an award in recognition of a number of things that UK Power Networks has done to respond to the opportunities and the challenges of the energy transition, which is front of mind for utilities around the world. And so it's not just one project or innovation, but rather a collection of things that the company is doing and has done to innovate across the entire supply chain and the entire system that collectively allows them to deliver a service that's cleaner, more reliable, more affordable, and more capable. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Sol. Just a reminder that we'll have some Q&A at the end, and you can use the chat feature to send in those questions to me, and I'll ask them on everyone's behalf. So with that, Sol, are you there and ready?
Hi, good morning, Daniel. Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right, great. Please.
Thank you for the introduction, and good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. As Daniel mentioned, my name is Saul, Director of Strategy at UK Power Networks, and I've prepared a short presentation to articulate what we are doing as a business to adapt our business and to adapt our network to a low-carbon world. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you may have. Just get them onto the chat room as Daniel has described. So firstly, a little bit about UK Power Networks for those that don't know. We are a distribution company in the UK, so we don't have any retail business and we don't deal with any generation or transmission. It's purely distribution. We own and operate 3 of the 14 networks in the UK, from the east of England, London, and the southeast. You'll see on the bottom right-hand side corner of the UK. We have about 6,500 people, and we have the privilege of serving approximately 8.3 million homes and businesses. That equates to circa population served of about 20 million people, and broadly speaking, we distribute about a third of the UK's energy to a third of the UK's population, and basically power a third of the UK's GDP. So it's hopefully quite easy to remember. In terms of our vision, we as an organisation, one of the reasons, or one of the background to why we have been successful as a business, particularly over the last 8 years, is that we have a very clear purpose as a business of what we are here to deliver, right? And that is enshrined in our vision, which you see on the bottom of the slide here. And it's actually really simple. What we say is we want to do the right things by our employees, we want to do the right things by our customers and wider stakeholders, and we want to do the right things by our shareholders to create long-term sustainable business. And I think what's quite different about our approach in this area is that our vision is not just some bland statement that has no teeth to it. Each one of those circles has some critical success factors underpinning them, with measures that we report on regularly as a business, and they cascade from the CEO all the way down to members of all of our teams across the business. And 60% of our bonuses are dependent on the performance against those critical success factors associated with employee engagement and with customers and stakeholder management. So, effectively 60% of our bonuses are based on non-financial measures aligned to our vision. So it's not just marketing collateral, it actually means something, and it impacts our take-home pay at the end of the year. So in terms of our performance, we were acquired from EDF Energy Networks in 2010. And our business has gone through a pretty seismic transformation over those last 8 years, and it has transformed beyond recognition. If you think about the measures that you would look to assess a distribution company to understand whether it was performing or not, what would you consider? You'd consider its safety of its employees and members of the public. You'd think of its reliability. You'd think of its customer service. You would think of its costs. And then you would think about how is it regarded by its stakeholders. And I think it's fair to say the business was in a bad state in 2010, and it was probably bottom on pretty much all of those measures. With a renewed focus and new ownership since acquisition in 2010, we're pleased to say that actually we're top, if not in the top 2 in pretty much all of these measures. So from a safety point of view, you see a lost time incident frequency rate of 0.02. So what that says is that last year, for last regulatory year, of the 6,500 people that worked in our business, we only had one lost time injury where that individual could not come in the next day and perform their duties. And that is what equates to a LTIFR of 0.02. And we're really proud of that because when we took over the business in 2010, we had north of about 50 to 55 lost time injuries. And we've brought that right down to a level where actually we're still not happy with it. We want to be in a world where no one gets hurt at work, and we're going to strive to make that beyond zero. In terms of customer service, you'll see the scores there. We get assessed, actually, by an external independent third party. So any customer that has an interaction with us, their name, as long as they give permission, will be put into a pot, and they'll be surveyed by a third-party company, and they'll give us a score out of 10. And as you can see, we've had some brilliant performance over the years. And I'm really pleased to say that last year our performance was 88. This year our performance is 90.6. So we've made another leap again, and we're keen to be the best performing operator in the UK. Broadly speaking, around about 1,500 customers a month give us feedback through this independent means. And then in the bottom graph, we talk about reliability. And for my American cousins, the graph on the left is, I guess, is equivalent to your SAFE, and the graph on your right, at the bottom right, is equivalent to your SAIDI. And so we measure the reliability in terms of customer interruptions per 100 customers and customer minutes lost, respectively. And again, we've seen some stellar improvements. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about how we've done that through a mixture of capabilities. And then obviously, in terms of cost, the way we explain cost to our stakeholders is to explain how much of the average domestic retail bill is attributed to networks. And in our patch, it's £75.57 a year, right, a year. Put that into context. The average mobile phone bill, a cellular bill, is around about £25 a month in the UK. So we want to make sure that we continue to deliver all of the outputs that I've described at the absolute lowest cost to consumers and to keep our share of the bill as low as possible. And we're really proud of the performance on this page. So what I'm going to do now is just explain that that performance that I describe here over the last 8 years hasn't really been delivered in an environment that one would describe as business as usual. Far from it. In fact, I would probably describe it as business as unusual. Because over the last 8 years, the energy system in the UK has transformed beyond recognition. We have over 30 gigawatts of distributed generation connected to the distribution networks, and that was not the case 8 years ago. We've got about 15 gigawatts of solar connected, of which, as you can see on my chart here, 6 gigawatts is connected to our networks alone. So to kind of give you a kind of sense of scale of what that means, if you worked in our connections business in 2010, you would have received, on average, 900 applications per annum. Right? At the peak, that went up to 9,000 inquiries per annum. Same amount of people, same systems, but you had to deal with a nearly 1,000% increase in terms of the volume of inquiries in a very short space of time, driven mainly by subsidies to renewable technologies. When those subsidies were taken away and slowly phased out, what we found was that the boom in renewables was filled by a boom in storage as the demand for frequency services became more and more apparent. And as you can see, when our system operator went out to market for 200 megawatts of enhanced frequency response, we alone, as 3 of the 14 networks, received inquiries equivalent to 28 gigawatts. So that's how much interest there was in the market for storage services on our networks. And then more recently, I don't think a day goes by without some form of news about electric vehicles in the press. And we have about 200,000 electric vehicles. These are pure plug-in vehicles in the UK, of which about 60,000, 30%, are operating and charging within our networks. And then lastly on heat, where I think this is probably the area where in the UK the least amount of progress has been made, in that we do need to be clear about what our strategy is going to be as a nation in terms of heat, how much of it will be electrified, how much of it would be perhaps served by green gas, hydrogen. And so that work is currently underway, but I'm pretty sure that there's going to be an impact on us as an electricity distributor in the near future. But I think electric transport is probably the more near-term revolutionary change that's coming our way. So you're probably wondering, okay, that's great, good scene setting, but how have you exactly adapted your business? Well, there are 6 key things that I'm going to talk about in my presentation very quickly, and they're pretty, they're pretty self-explanatory. So rather than go through them now and then go through them again, let me just move to the next slide. So the first thing we talk about is investing in smart technologies. Now, we don't do investment in smart technologies because it's cool. We do it because it goes back to our purpose of what are we here to deliver. And if you wanted to be a respected corporate citizen, which was the middle red circle in our vision, that means you need to deliver the most reliable networks in the UK. And so we are obsessed with performance, particularly with power cut instances and power cut durations. And what we're seeing over the last 8 years is a convergence of operational hardware and software. So operational assets are becoming much smarter than they have ever been. And what we're looking to do is to exploit how the more intelligent operational hardware combined with software can allow us to operate the network in more creative and innovative ways. So an example would be, we have these new recloser units called Alvins, as you see there on the top left. In the past, if you had an issue on the LV network, you'd have to send someone out to close the circuit, put in a fuse, and a job done. There may be an hour's duration power cut. What we've got with these units are remote controlled, and they also have fault location capabilities. So we trialled these units, we helped design them, and then we trialled them. And in only a 2-day period, that basically avoided a power cut for 900 customers in just 2 days, and that earned us nearly £50,000 of incentive revenue. Because the way our regulatory regime works is that if we can demonstrate improvement in reliability, we get the opportunity to earn incentive revenue because we're improving the service for our customers. So what our regulator has done is align the interests of the organisations with the interests of consumers. There are also other types of technologies here, but for example, we've made a commitment to spend north of £50 million in low voltage monitoring on our networks combined with advanced analytics. And the reason why we're doing that is, we could take the position that we're going to have lots of EVs, electric vehicles in the future. Let's just start digging up the roads today and reinforcing the network. But that would be dumb because we want to make sure that where we do invest, that investments are utilised. So what we're doing is we've basically got a new technology where we're rolling out these sensors across our network. They're informed by our analytics in terms of where we believe demand growth will come from electric vehicles. And then we're deploying these sensors, and if we see that load does materialise as our models predict, then what we would do is either procure flexibility in those areas, so we would try to seek demand reduction or aggregators or storage developers to try and help offset the constraint, and if that wasn't successful, then we would go and invest with copper in the ground. So that's basically what we're doing in terms of smart technologies. It is the modus operandi, it's how we think about work. The last thing we will do is put copper in the ground. We will look at any opportunity we can to try and alleviate a constraint or deal with an issue through the lowest cost possible. The second area, then, is around data, and I would summarise this slide by saying that we are moving our decision-making from an analogue world into a digital world. So the example that I would give you, which is quite a left-field example, When people talk about data, they always talk about the network. Right? I'm going to talk about data in terms of vulnerable customers. So we have on the top left there, a vulnerability mapping tool. That takes data from over 60 to 70 different sources. It was 60 at the time of writing this slide. It's now 70. And what that does, it tells us that when we have a power cut, our customer service agents can actually see in the region where that power cut has taken place how many vulnerable customers we have. And a vulnerable customer could be someone who is medically dependent on electricity, who could basically have just come out of hospital and have young children in the house, who potentially could be registered with a mental health charity and have some special needs. So basically we try to identify what our services mean in terms of those that are most vulnerable in society, and allow those 500 employees to go about proactively contacting customers and making sure that they're okay, organising on-site generation, organising community support vehicles if we think the duration of the outage is going to be longer than we would like. And so it really does drive our operational performance and our decision making. And that's why we are proud that our priority service customers, those that have registered as having some form of vulnerability, rate our service as 96% satisfied. That is 96% when they've had a power cut, right, which is the leading performance in the UK. We also use data to more traditional means. For example, you'll see the buses there, and I'm going to talk about the buses later on in a minute, but in London, for example, our local authorities here have an ambition to be a zero-carbon city by 2050, and that means 9,300 buses are going to need to convert from being diesel-based buses to either electric or hydrogen buses. And we've done some really innovative work using data on our network to come up with commercial propositions that allow bus operators to connect much earlier than they otherwise would have done had they had to wait for reinforcement. And that alone has saved millions of pounds and accelerated the bus deployment in London. And I'm going to talk about that in a bit because personally, as a Londoner, I'm very proud of that. So the data is the second area about how we're changing our business in terms of the way we show up. The third thing I would say is that the message I would give is that, look, I think it's impossible to be able to recruit and retain all the talent you need in this new world. Right? It's just impossible. There's no way. There's no way we as a network operator covering the east of England are going to be able to attract the data scientists that go and work for Google or Microsoft or Facebook. There's no point trying because it's just not going to work. You're not going to be able to pay the salaries or even be able to retain the type of people that you need. And therefore, I think forging new partnerships is absolutely going to be at the heart of the strategy, and that's what we've tried to do. So I gave you the example earlier when I was talking about customer service. So all of the network companies in the UK, they all have the same mechanisms in terms of this third-party company that surveys our customers, as I said, about 1,200 a month. And we get feedback and then we act on it. And we're really proud of that, 90.6 in terms of our customer satisfaction. But actually, that still is old age, because if you look at the best fintech sectors, you look at retail, they don't wait for someone to ring you a week later. They give you a text message straight away, and they ask for your feedback in real time. So what we did was we partnered with a company called Rant and Rave, so that if you have an interaction with us, we don't wait for the regulator to ring you. Actually, you'll receive online feedback from us, and we can map that feedback to the job, the individual, the manager, and the team that have delivered that service. So we've got real-time dashboards, and we've created league tables about which are the best performing teams and which are the teams that may need more support. And that means that we've gone from surveying circa 250 a week to 2,000 customers a week. And we're using that to drive our service proposition and our service improvements. And that's why, I'm so proud to be able to have a customer satisfaction score of 90.6. It doesn't happen by accident. It's through sustained effort in the way that I've described. Then I think the bottom left picture on Piccolo, what that is an online digital platform that allows us to register our needs. So we've put on that platform sites where we have constraints, and we allow or enable storage developers, DR providers to basically tell us where they've got assets located and where they could potentially offer us a service. to be able to, for us to offset our investment. And obviously we would pay them a service fee for that, and we've made a commitment that all 200 megawatts of load-related reinforcement to enhance the network, we're going to put through a competitive channel. So we're going to check and test whether the market can provide an alternative solution at lower cost before we go and invest. And again, we're leading the way in the UK in terms of the way we're doing that. So I haven't seen any questions pop up, so I'm going to carry on. The next area is about investing in our people. So I think sometimes when we talk about innovation and how the energy world is changing, we sometimes forget about the people that are actually going to make the change happen. Because in order for us to deal with these challenges, you need to think differently. We need to come out of our comfort zones. We need to open our mind to new ways to solve old problems. And therefore, you can have the best technology in the world, but unless you have a vision, a curiosity, some desire, right, to actually want to think differently, you're not going to go anywhere. That tech is just going to sit on its shelf. So I've highlighted 3 examples here. I've got 6,500 people in my business, but I've highlighted 3 people for a specific reason. So the first person on the left-hand side is an Asian chap by the name of Salim Naeem. He actually joined our business when I was born, right? And he's a control engineer for London, really well respected. Now, if anyone tells me that people can't change their ways, I will tell them rubbish and point them in Salim's direction. Salim is the guy that's basically written our smart metering strategy. He's basically working on our DSO, distribution system operator transition program, to think about what the control room of the future needs to look like and how do we deliver it today and have a migration path to that future. And he's an amazing guy and delivering some really good work. Right? The second lady is Lynn McDonald in the middle here. Lynn's only been with us 6 years, but she's the lady that actually wrote our monitoring strategy in terms of how do we put together a capability on our low voltage network that allows us to invest just enough, just in time. Right? And then the third person is a guy called Nuno. Now, you may think Nuno looks quite miserable. That's actually the happiest I've ever seen him. But he's an infrastructure planner. And infrastructure planners are a strange breed because 5 years ago, you would never put an infrastructure planner in front of a customer or a stakeholder because they're the guys that do all the complex maths to work out how much, how you need to enhance the network. But Nuno has put himself out into, in an uncomfortable zone. He's fronting up with our stakeholders in the East about how the network needs to develop to meet their needs. And what I'm really proud of him about is that he's managed to combine understanding of stakeholders, good old-fashioned engineering techniques, and data science to deliver 3 times as much capacity for the same amount of money than what we envisaged when we put our plan together to our regulator about 4 years ago. And he's using techniques that could never even have been envisaged 4 years ago to deliver that value. So I think these are people that, effectively have a real curiosity, and I guess one of the secrets of our success is encouraging that challenge in all of our people to be able to think differently. The next one is about making a positive impact to society. Now, you might think, well, that's a given. But I would say, when I go and review what other companies do, typically what they say is, oh, we've connected this many connection points and, et cetera, et cetera. But actually, quite frankly, the great wide world doesn't care about how many vehicles are around. They care about why are you actually having, say, electric vehicles in the first place. So when I talk to you about our example about the buses in London, right, we, through our engagement with the bus operators, our local mayor, and local public authority bodies, we managed to come up with some really innovative solutions that allowed bus operators to connect much faster. And the way in which we explained that was not that now we've got a couple of hundred buses that are electric. We basically said, actually, we know that those buses operate on specific routes, and we know how many schools are on those routes, and we also know how much nitrous oxide emissions are actually contributed by buses. So actually, 25,000 school children are breathing cleaner air as a result of the work that we've helped to deliver. And that's an amazing achievement. And we've saved nearly £1.6 million in just 1 year alone to 2 bus garages. Scaling that to all of the buses, that could be many hundreds of millions of pounds worth of investment that could be put to use in other areas, as opposed to in the electricity network where it's not needed, quite frankly, as a result of the innovative approaches we've taken. So that, again, is a good example of working with stakeholders, working as a good business operator, a good network operator, but actually thinking about the impact wider than just your wires. And the last one, I think this is the last one, is around how we're transitioning our business to be what we term a distribution system operator. And we've set out a strategy 2 years ago. It's really simple, 5 key things that we're going to do. But that strategy was not designed by us. It was actually designed with our stakeholders. And you'll see the stats there in terms of the strong level of endorsement that we've had from our stakeholders in terms of our priorities and specifically what we plan to do in each of those 5 areas. And we're really quite keen to ensure that we shape a smart grid for all, so that even if those people who are most vulnerable in society, we need to understand how the changing nature of the energy system impacts them, and what does that mean, therefore, for the services that we provide them. So, in conclusion, I guess there are four key messages that I would leave with you. We are obsessed with performance, and our performance is ingrained within our vision, and therefore, we can talk about the future, but unless you can deliver the safest, lowest cost, most reliable networks today, no one will believe that you'll be ready for the future. So we are already focusing and making sure that performance today creates an environment where we're trusted to be ready for the future. We definitely are the most innovative DNO in the UK. I mean, we've saved over £150 million to consumers just in this regulatory period alone over the last 4 years. And if you look at the reporting that's issued by the regulator, that's the single biggest percentage of any distribution company in the UK. We're not resting on our laurels. We're adapting the business. So we've got 1 foot in today, but we've also got 1 foot in tomorrow to make sure that we're ready through our DSO strategy, our monitoring strategy, and our use of data and technology. And lastly, I think that underlines everything, that unless you know what you're here to deliver, unless you have that clarity of purpose, everything you do, is just wasted. We really have a very strong vision, and it drives everything that we do in our business, and it's encapsulated in our values. So that's basically what I wanted to say in terms of our story over the last 8 years and what we've delivered with our people. So I'm going to pause now for questions.
Phil, thanks so much. That was wonderful. I'm just going to start with a comment, something that really struck me as you were giving your presentation, which was the really effective job that you all are doing with storytelling, because you began with one of those metrics of your success and how with customer service you have seen a steady uptick in terms of the satisfaction ratings that you've received. And historically, and I think, even today in the minds of many network operators, customer service really is viewed primarily as just about reliability and cost. But what I think that you conveyed quite clearly was that you have taken a much broader view of how to connect with your customers by providing more visibility and transparency into what is happening and changing within the system, and connecting the traditional utility metrics to more tangible outcomes within society. And so just, a comment on that, I think that clearly has been an effective part of your strategy, but it also requires, reaching customers in a different way. And so perhaps there's a question there about, the journey that you've gone on in terms of finding new avenues of how to communicate that story out to customers within your service territory. Could you talk a little bit about that, about how you are messaging differently or finding new ways to communicate that story?
Yeah, sure. So we have, every year we have a stakeholder engagement strategy, and what that looks at is it basically looks to engage all of the 3 regions, the customers and local community groups and businesses in the 3 regions that we serve. And we have stakeholder representatives to challenge our strategies, challenge our performance, and help prioritize what we do. And as part of that, you sort of need to show up in the marketplace in a way that is meaningful to them. So if you start talking about, after diversity, maximum demand, and load-related reinforcement, you're going to lose people. So part of what we've tried to do is to talk about what's important to stakeholders, to local people, and then try to understand where is there synergy between what's important to them and what the electricity network can actually deliver. And we found some really good traction in areas like electrification of public transport, electrification of vehicles, greater interest in renewable energy, greater interest in kind of social mobility and social welfare, and what network companies can do in terms of sharing data or actually using data from other government bodies to deliver a much more tailored and integrated service. So I think when you start to talk about services that society wants, it generally tends to help you become more relevant to those that you are there to serve.
Thanks. One question that came in was, how do you choose what technologies to invest in? And just to add something to that, I think you talked about some partnerships that you have pursued and the importance that has, and how you incentivize your teams to work towards certain performance metrics. But this is often a question that I think many utilities struggle with about what is the role of internal R&D versus investing in partnerships or joint ventures. What has been the strategy and some of the effective methods that you've found to identify those technologies that can really have applications that add value and impact?
Oh, okay. So I think the way we try and just keep it simple at UKPN, what we say is to anyone, if you've got an idea that's going to deliver business value and you're willing to back that idea, come and talk to us, right? And we're all ears. And if we believe you and we think that there is merit in your idea and we can prove it, then we'll deliver it and scale it quickly. If not, and you're not willing to back it, then there's no point working together. So we try to be very, very open in our culture to new businesses that potentially are thinking about problems in different ways. And so we do that, for example, through, we have an innovation call for action every year. So we combine forces with other companies and we have an energy ideas exchange where we put out problem statements to the market and we invite people to come and explain what services or solutions they could provide us. And on the back of that, we may partner with organizations that we believe that their solutions could work, and particularly where they're willing to back their proposition as well, in terms of having some skin in the game. It makes the discussion a lot more easier than that. And through that, we've got over 100 plus organizations that we're working with, which is amazing, right? Because we're trying to make ourselves more accessible to more smaller and medium-sized enterprises that necessarily would not have worked in the energy sector in the past. The second thing we do is that we, when people write to us with propositions or ideas, we generally tend to review and respond and open for new ideas. So there was a company that came to see us yesterday talking about narrowband IoT devices. And we said, okay, well, let's have a look at the business model because, how would the business model work? What would the cost be? And then we can actually assess that. And if it doesn't help us to either deliver a better service, keep the lights on, deliver better safety, or actually help us keep costs down, we won't look at it. So we're very, very focused in terms of the organizations we work with, because we've got to tie back to one of the critical success factors on our vision, and we've got to make ourselves open on multiple channels to try and get players that would not necessarily want to work with the energy sector, but to get them involved. And as I said, over 100 plus partners we've found to being a more, taking that more collaborative approach.
Great. I have a question for you about the strategy that you are pursuing for transport electrification. I know that there's a number of different projects that you have started that are designed to address the needs of different types of vehicle owners. So addressing some of the issues related to vehicle uptake and network preparedness and charging availability for personal cars, but then also projects that are working with large charging facility providers or with fleets for commercial, fleet owners or for municipal buses. In all of that, are there one or two projects that you are most excited about that you think are really promising, that are doing something pretty unique?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that, our electric vehicle strategy, I wouldn't describe it as projects, because I think it's the electric vehicle kind of challenge or opportunity is actually a business strategy. And within that business strategy, we have certain projects. So what we've done is we've said, look, what is it that we want to achieve in terms of outcomes related to electric vehicles? Right. Well, we want investment policies and standards that are industry leading, right, and that accommodate electric vehicles. We want to deliver a great customer experience for people that may want to upgrade their supplies to support electric vehicles, and we want to make sure that the network is prepared for the electric vehicle uptake. Right? So those are, I guess, the three objectives. And then you kind of say, okay, well, how do you go about delivering that? Well, what we've done is we've said, look, we want to make sure we've got the best-in-class forecasting tools, right? Because unless you can predict or at least understand where EV growth is coming, you don't know where to invest, and you want to try and find that out ahead of the game. Secondly, once you've got that monitoring in place, so once you've got that forecasting in place, you want to try and monitor. And then when you've got the monitoring in place, you want to try and start to develop smart propositions that allow people to connect in a smart way, as opposed to making dumb assumptions about their demand requirements. So if that's the kind of three-stranded strategy around, but get the best forecast, monitor really well, come up with smart solutions, right, that allow people to connect for less and connect faster, then we've got a number of, I guess, projects, if you want to call them in your language, that have helped us to do that. So one project would be a project called Optimize Prime, because what we found was that fleet operators in the UK are going to move faster than the general public in terms of electrification of transport. And the reason why they're moving faster is because of changes to local taxation laws and congestion zones, where if you drive a vehicle in London now, you're going to be charged north of £25. So that's going to be, at today's exchange rate, which is not that great against the US dollar anymore, but say $29, $30 a day. And if you drive an HGV lorry, heavy goods vehicle, that's going to be £100 a day. So $120. So that's driving people to think about how they can transition their fleets faster. So what we've done, and by engaging with that group, what we found is they had a set of unique challenges, which is very different to the domestic market. Their challenges are things like, can I share my EV infrastructure when I'm not using it to try and lower the cost? If my staff are home, work from home, i.e. they travel with their small van from their home, and therefore they charge overnight, how is that going to work in terms of metering and electricity consumption and bills? Because today they have a fuel card. So they're working through these really knotty issues. And how would that work in terms of range anxiety and range, etc.? So we put a project together called Optimize Prime that brought together some of the leading companies in the UK to trial some of these concepts, and those concepts will land themselves into business as usual practices as and when they're proven. So again, that's a good way of taking a problem, bringing partners with you, setting up a project, testing your hypotheses, and then getting the findings embedded into your business as usual operations. And that's the path that we normally take with these kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. One other question about energy storage. You talked about storage that is being connected to your system and the sort of value that can provide to alleviate constraints and provide value. Could you maybe just talk about what you see as the market for energy storage in the UK, and how big of a role you think that will play going forward to provide flexible capacity to balance renewables and other things?
I think it's definitely going to be a growth area in the future. I mean, you see the numbers there in terms of the inquiries, the accepted offers. We've got 200 megawatts connected. We've got accepted offers of over 2 gigawatts, and that's only in three of our networks. And so I think it's going to be a growth market. If you see what we as distribution companies are doing in the UK, we're starting to go and procure flexibility, which is a contract that allows people like storage operators to help us alleviate local network constraints, which is cheaper than perhaps reinforcing, and where it is cheaper, we'll give a service contract to provide the services, and those things are going to become more and more frequent and more pervasive. And I think as that happens, you'll see the market grow.
Great. So I think that as usual, that was a very efficient, high signal-to-noise ratio presentation, and we got through quite a lot. We've gotten through all the questions that we received, and so why don't we wrap it up there? Thank you for giving this presentation and sharing this story with others and with our audience, and we will distribute this presentation, and I assume that if others want to follow up with you to ask more, you'll be willing to talk with them, individually.
No problem, no problem. If you go through James Watson in my team, we'll make sure that we field any other questions that people may have.
Wonderful. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good morning. Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.